one of the first things is one that's quite important, and I'm going to make a thumbnail out of it actually. It's talking about the zone of proximal development. Said this is really important when you get to Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development. You don't want to just work with a person where they are in ability level. You want to devise interventions that will help them consolidate the new skill capacities that will be emerging as they advance in age, or if adults, as they move through the remediational process of actualizing the skills within their capacity. We really need to distinguish these things. Our approach for young people who are in the process of inheriting the full measure of their brain complex, their mind-brain complex, we need to use one set of approaches and ways of thinking about it. But if we're dealing with a mature adult who has not developed these skills in the area that we are concerned with, we have to use a different approach for them. So I guess one of the things you should get into mind is that even if we have a fully articulated mind, we may not use those skills every day in our everyday work. The world around us may simply not challenge us to that level, so we're used to working at the functional level. The point is that we need to have the capacity to think at our optimal level when the occasion requires it. And so you'll be wanting to assess your learner and decide, for example, are there skills at an age-related emergence and how much can they think about at this age and so on. Or if they're a fully mature adult, then you know the brain-mind complex is also mature, but perhaps they haven't learned to use it in certain areas that are important. And so you'll begin to deal with this idea that we'll get to in Vygotsky after a while, called the zone of proximal development. Now, another thing, which this is sort of my own thinking about this, the climate in which we must operate when we do these things, I call it the zone of personal dominion. Personal dominion. And this is my quote on that. The Creator has encapsulated the human mind in an impregnable zone of personal freedom of choice. In parentheses, I put free agency. Nothing enters a human mind that person does not choose to have enter it. I hope you can catch the vision of this. For me, sitting in sacrament meeting watching the young people play on games on their phone tells me that they have not opened their mind to receive what's going on in that meeting. And life can be very much that way. They have freedom of choice. And that is something that the Lord gave us from the very foundation of the spirit world. And He will not negate it or cancel it or change it. So whatever we do, we have to respect the fact that they have a zone of personal dominion. So the Creator has encapsulated the human mind in an impregnable zone of personal freedom of choice. Nothing enters a human mind that person does not choose to have enter it. So we cannot command attention. It must be freely given. This is why we say that mind creation, helping someone develop a fully articulated human mind with an attendant enlightened Christian conscience, is literally a joint venture project between an expert and a learner with each side bringing critical elements to the process, with neither side being able to proceed without the purposeful, volitional cooperation of the other. At this intimate level, the previous quotation takes on monumental implications. In order for progress to be made, 2 generations must agree. And just looking forward a little bit, when we get into some of the material in the knowledge domains, there's just some excellent material on how you would go about this if you wanted to involve a person in a joint study and still respect their zone of personal dominion. Not just theory, but actual practices of counselors and how they go about accomplishing this. So don't let it throw you or worry you too much. If you'll stick with this and come along with me, we'll eventually add that tool to your toolkit. Now, in looking at what we're doing here, after we leave Fisher, we're going to take a look at Hall, who talks to us about culture in order to describe the world in which we live, including the intellectual world in which so much of the learning and changing and growing takes place. And then we'll deal with Vygotsky and also Feuerstein. Fisher describes the emergence of thinking capacity. Feuerstein grapples with preparing minds to comprehend cultural elements and structures and how to operate within them at a societal level. That may sound confusing to you, but he was in Israel at the time that the refugees were coming in from all over the world, bringing with them all different cultures, attitudes, understandings, expectations. And the Israelis needed citizens who were Israelis, who were committed to Israel and its foundational principles, its processes, and its goals. And they didn't have time to deal with all of these other cultural elements, and so they struggled with how do you get a mind trained into the sequence of knowledge that you need. This is almost exactly transferable to the idea of how you'd help a person develop a testimony of the gospel. So please don't think when you've finished with Fisher that you got it. Remember, I warned you, there are 8 knowledge domains that will contribute to that final set of tools that you will use to recreate yourself as a master interventionist and get your master's of mortality degree. I'm looking for a special note that I wanted to put in about picturing ourselves in that, but I guess I'm going to add it to one of the other tapes. We'll get to that when we can. Now, we need to deal with guided reinvention, because we can't impose, we can't force. The most we can do is teach and help them have those aha moments at their level of understanding, and suddenly they begin to reinvent for themselves their own model of how the world works. And that's called guided reinvention, where we don't stand passively by. We're wise as serpents, harmless as doves. We're leading them through this process with all the tools and skills that we have acquired, and encourage them to do guided reinvention. This, in my humble opinion, means teaching as Jesus teaches. So you should look forward to acquiring some real power in your life as you bring these things to the Lord ask for understanding and spiritual development and the ability to use them for a good cause. Anyway, in guided reinvention, they need to make their own discoveries and insights, which may be very rudimentary, as you probably are to Heavenly Father, as yours probably are to Heavenly Father. In other words, you begin where you are, you begin where they are. And if you're dealing with a child, their aha moments and their reinvention may seem rather simple to you, but you must be able to recognize how important it is to them. And that will give you true power in your teaching, in your interventions. And these interventions that lead to this result around life's truths comprise true teaching. One of the definitions of true teaching only takes place when you're helping a motivated learner teach themselves something that they want to know. And I wish I could tell you in advance how many good ideas there are on how to go about doing this. But we have to work through this a step at a time, and we'll get to it as time passes. Okay, I think that's sufficient for tape 1.